All right, so let's take a look at what we're going to be striving to accomplish this week as we wrap up our module on textures and materials. Okay, on Tuesday we spent some time looking at the marker scene, and as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, it's not technically due until next Tuesday. So make sure you wrap it up. You're going to get some lab time today to work on a pretty big assignment. So you can finish up this one and finish up the lighthouse scene today. That's the big goal. So you can spend the rest of your time over the next couple of days to your homework, which is going to be a fun desktop scene. So make sure that one gets kind of shuffled out and completed as soon as possible. In addition, if you return to the week 3 module on Canvas, you can see that I've added the next 2 little components to this week's conversation. Our lab today is going to take us to this wonderful little lighthouse scene, and it's pretty easy or a pretty fantastic model. I've given you guys this wonderful set. It's an exterior, and as one might imagine, given this week's conversation, your job is to take this gray shaded environment and begin to add textures and materials and bring this thing to life. Okay? It should be a pretty fun little assignment. It's not without its own challenges to overcome. I'm not going to give you all the answers to the puzzle quite yet, but our conversation here in a minute will help drive the correct application of textures into this little scene. It should be something pretty fun. And I'm going to give you guys a big chunk of time today to work on it, because it's a little bit larger in scope and size than what we've tried to accomplish in the past, so it's just going to take some production cycles to get it done. In addition, your homework this week is going to be another scene file. It's the desktop scene. In this one, I'm giving you a project file that looks not too dissimilar to that little scene up there. I've given you all the models in the scene file, so you should be able to go in and apply textures and materials to everything and start crafting a beautiful picture that we can share with the folks online. Okay, so our conversation and our mission to tackle how to apply materials and textures continue. Okay, questions on what we're striving to accomplish this week? Excellent. Okay, let's jump over into Maya real fast and start looking at what we're going to need to really kind of master in order to get some of these textures on our models. Okay. Now on Tuesday we spent some additional time talking about the details of the hypershade that allows us to infuse a texture, an image, onto our model. Right. Let's review that just real fast. I'm going to go in and as with most things, I'm going to start simply with a little bit of a plane, just a 2-dimensional surface, very, very basic. Okay. So walk me through the process. How do I create a new material and then add a texture, an image, to that plane? Walk me through it. So which opens up what? The hypershade. You got it. So absolutely, if you go to the top of your screen, way up here, this little icon is going to open up your hypershade. Okay? Which is our environment for creating, editing, and enhancing materials and textures, or applying textures to our 3D models. Okay. So what's next? Lambert 1. And why do you say Lambert 1? And you're right. But why? Why do you know Lambert 1 versus Particle Cloud or Shader Glow 1? Not sure. Lambert 1 is the default material that's applied to every single object inside of Maya initially, right? It's kind of like the master material. Everything is going to be applied to Lambert 1 exclusively, right? If I was to add in another like cylinder or a sphere, for example, those new objects would also be assigned to the influence of that material. It's kind of our go-to base material that everything gets associated to. So if we wanted to make a change to how my little plane is going to look, selecting Lambert 1 and then fiddling around with the settings over there will give us the result that we're after. Okay? Now, last time we talked about the different types of materials, the awesomeness of the Fong E material in comparison to the Blinn and the Lambert. Lambert's kind of a cool one, right? But what general effect, and take some inspiration from the little shader ball up there, what general effect or visual appearance does the Lambert material produce for us? Matte, yeah, very diffuse, right? Absent of any sort of reflections or shininess whatsoever, right? In comparison, if I was to create a new material here real fast, let's do it real quick. Let's do good old Fong E. Okay, if I created a Fong E, and give me 2 seconds here, I was messing around. Let's do the material viewer. Get that back in play here. Come on, interface. I know you can do it. There it is. Let's switch it. There it is. And now it looks a little bit similar to what you guys are working with. Okay, so now if you look at the material viewer here, when we add a different material like a Fongy or a blend, what do we add into the visuals of that material? What's the new thing in comparison to the Lambert? We spent some time talking a lot about it. Specular highlight. Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. And if you were to describe the specular highlight, what is it? Good question, right? It's a reflection of the light source in the scene, or the fake reflection of the light source in the scene. And it's that big light spot on the center of our model over there. Of course, we can change the size of the roughness, or the roughness determines the fall off, how sharp or how diffuse the boundary of our specular highlight is. Then highlight size will make it bigger or smaller. Really kind of blur the reflections, or blur the specular highlight a little bit by messing around with the reflection, or the roughness and the highlight size. Okay, so that's what we gain by going into these other material types: the ability to start creating a surface, surface characteristics that's not too dissimilar to something that's shiny. Okay. Okay. However, the surface characteristics are one thing, but how do we add an image to this? How do we throw in, and let's return to our Lambert material since this is the one that's applied to our plane. How do I go in and physically add an image to this material? Yes, the checkered box, absolutely. Specifically on the color channel, this one right here. So we can click on it, which is going to open up this little window here, and we're going to choose the file node. Technically, this checkered box adds a new output node to this object, okay? So we want to add the file node in here, which is going to allow us, it even brings that file node to the foreground, which is going to allow us to load in an image right there. This little folder icon will take us to where we want to go, and I'm just going to put in that brick texture, okay? This is just one that I happen to have on my laptop, okay? If we return to our model here, where is it? Where's the image? What? It's not there. Well, it's there. We're just not viewing it at the moment. Does anyone remember the keyboard shortcut that allows us to preview all the textures that are currently mapped to our objects? 6. And there it is. There's the texture. The 6 on the top row of your keyboard previews all the textures, and you're ready to start rocking and rolling. Okay? It really is just that easy. However, on a simple surface like this, the process is pretty self-explanatory. We can get to it. But when we start working on more complex shapes, and believe it or not, like a sphere or a cylinder is where we'll end up, okay? How does that texturing process look? Let's look at it again, okay? I'm going to add in, let's do a sphere. It's also applied to the Lambert material. There it is. Dun, 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 dun. Not too bad. Not too bad. However, let's put our cylinder in. Okay. All right. Now, at the moment, what's generating the content for all of this, or what's determining how each one of these things is mapped, or how the image is mapped to each one of these things, is something called a UV map, which we haven't had time to talk about yet. We're going to talk about the UV maps in the future. And they work pretty okay. I'm going to say okay for basic type objects. Okay, well, these primitive shapes are generated with UV maps. Okay, but on more complex shapes where we've done a significant amount of editing, this is not what we're going to need, and not what's going to work. Okay, so let's open up a scene file here that will allow us to check out this stuff in action. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up the project file that I gave you for your lab today, which is going to be your lighthouse. Okay. Okay. Welcome to your island oasis. Okay. The lighthouse. Check it out. It's a pretty neat little fun project. Let's get rid of my attribute editor just to give me a little bit more space here. And it is really just an island. And your job here in a couple minutes is to go in and start exploring how we can apply textures and materials to all the objects in the scene to bring it to life. Okay? And there are a couple things in here that we need to look at. Let's focus our attention initially on the lighthouse itself. Okay? So here's the lighthouse. I got a whole bunch of polygons in here. And yes, this is kind of where the monotony of selecting polygons and assigning them to materials begins. Welcome to computer graphics. At times, it's incredibly laborious. It is what it is, okay? So let's go in and start making some material associations with some pretty interesting polygons. FYI, if you hit the F11 key on your keyboard, it automatically transfers you over into component selection mode and highlights the polygonal or face selection type. Good little keyboard shortcut now that we're getting a little bit more comfortable working inside of Maya. All right, so I'm going to create a new material just for the base of my little cylinder here. Right-click, go down to the bottom of my menu, and assign new material. And I'm going to assign it, let's just do Fong-E, okay? We'll call this Lighthouse Base. Okay, there we go. All right. And, as one might imagine, we need to put some sort of image on the outside of that lighthouse. Let's do it real fast. We'll do it together. We're going to follow the exact same production pipeline that we did a second ago. Clicking on the little checkered box on the color channel row brings up this window, which will allow us to add an input node. We want the file input node, and now I have to go find a file. Okay? Now I have to go find a JPEG that I can put on here. But just don't grab any JPEG that you find on good old Google, okay? Because we want to use something that's a little bit more directed and special for the computer graphics community, which is called a tiling texture, which is an image that repeats both horizontally and vertically, but you don't see any sort of harsh lines when that pattern repeats. There's a fantastic resource out on the web that I want to introduce you guys to today. That's our go-to location for all things textures, okay? As one might imagine. Oops, textures.com, okay? Boom, okay? Textures.com. This is a resource that's been around for, I don't know, probably 15 years. I've been using the textures.com for a long, long time. It is fantastic. It is a library of pictures. That's all it is. It's really specific and directed towards 3D artists. That's who the target audience is for all of this stuff. It requires you to sign up. It's free, okay? There's a free version and a pro version. I'll be honest with you, I've only ever had the free version. With the free version, you're allowed to download like 15 credits of images a day, which really that translates into like 15 megabytes of data transfer a day. And if you're selective, if you only download what you're going to need, you're almost never going to run into the cap, okay? The pro version opens up, I think it's like $75 a year or something like that, okay? And the pro version unlocks, some higher end, higher quality images, some higher resolution textures and what have you. And if you're a professional artist, that's something you'll definitely want to take a look at. However, let me sign in real fast. Of course, now I got to remember what my oh man, I gotta remember what my, I've already signed up. Oh, great, they remembered. Ha! Nope, I'm not a robot. Hey, oh, I hit the wrong button. I was meant to hit log in. There we go. All right, so here it is. I've logged in. And let's go find an image that we can use on the exterior of my little lighthouse. What makes sense to you guys? Exterior, a brick pattern, that might be kind of fun, right? And if you look at the way that textures.com is kind of laid out, there's two ways to navigate around the library. Of course, we have this center section here, big tiles, nice visuals of the different categories, but there's also that vertical nav bar over here, okay? So depending on how you work and what makes sense for your brain, feel free to choose whatever you want, and let's just go into the brick category. And then here are all these subcategories. We've got blocks, cinder blocks, medieval, rounded, special, okay? Let's just go into cinder block. Oh, those are boring. Let's go find something else that's fun. Let's go into medieval. Why not? Because I just like to be medieval. Here we go. Ooh, dirty would be good. Yeah, okay, cool. So what's really neat about these is that some, and I want to say some in finger quotes, because some is really a lot, a majority of the textures that you're going to find on this site are tiling. And let's check it out. Let's look at one here real fast. Let's do this one, just the first one, okay? All right, so this is a tiling or seamless texture. If we preview it under this link, it'll take you to this view, and now check it out. We can zoom out as far as we can go, and you can see that that one image is being like stamped down horizontally and vertically. Do you see where the stamp begins and ends? Do you see any sort of border? No, that's a tiling texture. It's seamless, okay? If you compare a seamless texture to one that's not, like its neighbor over here, and let's see, I'm not going to get a preview of it. Oops. If I click on it. Come on. Oh, yeah, they're not going to give me the preview of it tiling, but if you look carefully down here at the bottom, you can very noticeably see it gets darker here in the corner. We're going to see that change in value if it stamps down both horizontally and vertically, right? This is kind of part of the illusion of computer graphics, is that we work with very small images and then we stamp them down horizontally and vertically infinitely in this gigantic field to create the illusion of something that's of much higher resolution, okay? So let's just download this bad boy here real fast. Let's just download it. Oh, it's free. Wonderful. And I'm going to show in Finder. There it is. If you take a look at it, it's just an image like any other image. This is a JPEG, okay? But it's a tiling texture. So we're going to use this one inside of our texturing pipeline. And here, I'm going to do this just to make it a little bit easier. I wanted to copy and paste it into the folder that I've been using for all of our stuff. Oops. There we go. Let's jump back over into Maya and load that file in. And it was that one. There we go. Let's open it up. Hit the 6 key to show all my textures. And there we go. So now we have a little bit of a problem, because if you look at the way that it's mapped onto my guy here, this is not exactly what I was hoping for, right? Not at all what I was hoping for. It looks like it's what? Yeah, it's just way too big, right? We want the pattern of the image to be much, much smaller. So what are we to do here? Let's go investigate a little bit. Let's go investigate the details of our hypershade, which draws out all the channels that are physically putting that object on our model. All right, let's load in the Lighthouse, okay? And I just did the middle mouse button and dragged it down in here. Give myself some more screen real estate. And I want to graph this entire material. Does anyone remember how to graph it? How to tell hypershade to show all the input and output connections for that material? Yeah. You got it. The box with the 2 triangles. So that's this one, right? Bloop. Click it. There it is. Let's look at specifically how this texture is being put together. See, yep. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Nope, that's about as big as it's going to be. Okay. All right. So if we look at the way the connections are communicated to us here, if we follow the flow of information, if you will, we can start to understand specifically how this texture ends up on the model itself, okay? Here's the material. This defines the surface attributes. It has a number of input channels, all of these things. These are all input channels, okay? Think of these are little nodes, these little terminals here. The terminals on the left side are always the inputs, and the terminals on the right side are always the outputs, okay? So it's receiving some information from this node, which is exclusively responsible just for just loading an image. That's all it's doing, is just pointing towards a file on my computer. And this place 2D texture 1, this is the node that's physically responsible for placing the texture on the object itself, okay? So we have a node that places the image. We tell it what image to place, and then all that's fed into a very specific input channel on the material. Okay? So if I grab my Place 2D Texture node, this one right here, and look at all of its properties, perhaps we can change a couple things here. Because we don't have a lot of options in here. Yeah, that's it. Those are kind of all the channels that we have available to us. If we were using a UV map, then we could do repeat UVs. Okay. Let's just see what we get here. Let's put this to like 5. Oops, I hit R on accident. That's not going to work. Which is going to make it, yeah. See, this is the problem. We don't have a UV map, so it is kind of repeating it, but it's stretching it. Stretching the texture, right? It looks nothing like the original, and perhaps I still have it. Let's go back. Let me show you the original. So that's the original picture. If you look at what the computer is doing to it, it's stretching out those bricks. So we really haven't dialed in the correct projection of this texture onto the object itself. The default settings are completely failing us, right? In addition to experimenting around with the impact of the repeat UV, and let's just put this back to 1 on both those channels. Let's put the coverage to 5, which does something, I went the wrong way. Whoops. Let's put it to 0.25. Yeah, 0.25 is, so that's not the scale attributes that we want. There's nothing in here that really determines the scale of all of this, right? Which is kind of a bummer. So we need something else. We need something else to really kind of take the reins here and start working and placing this object on our model correctly. Now, a lot of folks, they think, well, I'll just go into the image here. Well, the image itself doesn't have what we need, right? This image node just loads an image. That's all it's responsible for doing, okay? We need to change this thing, okay? The Place 2D Texture node is great for simple objects that have UV maps. Well, we don't have UV maps, and UV maps are really difficult to build. They take a tremendous amount of energy. We're going to do it in this class, but not quite yet. UV maps, and you'll hear me talk a lot about this in the future, UV maps are kind of like the pattern of a dress, right? Imagine that I'm standing in front of you wearing a dress. I've never worn a dress before. Maybe I should wear a dress at some point in my life. That'd be kind of fun, right? Okay, so imagine I'm wearing a dress, okay? Well, if you think about it, a garment, a piece of clothing like my sweater, it's a three-dimensional object when I'm in it, right? But when it's constructed, it's a two-dimensional object. All pieces of clothing start flat on a piece of fabric, right? And then we cut them out in very specific ways. We sew them along very specific seams, and then voila, 3D object, okay? We have to kind of reverse engineer our object. You know, if you're a seamstress, you start with a pattern, then you build your object, and you get a 3D object, right? Well, we kind of have to do it in the opposite direction. We already have our 3D object, and we need to reverse engineer it into a two-dimensional object. That's the process of creating a UV map, okay? It's kind of like, imagine you're sitting in front of a birthday present, okay? And you have your birthday presents all wrapped and ready to go. And if we want to paint on the outside of our wrapping present, we have to, the best way to do it, and this is kind of a product of computer graphics, okay? What we have to do is very carefully pull back the tape of the birthday present and unwrap the wrapping paper and fold it flat on a surface, like on a table. And once it's flat, then we can draw on it. Then the computer will fold the paper back up and wrap it around the present again for us, okay? Making UV maps is tough, and it's not always something that we need. We can use other technology to correctly place this texture in our model without having to go through the labor of making a UV map. This process is called projection mapping, okay? Let's take a look at it. Now, to include a projection node into our setup here requires a little bit of work, and let's go through it. It's all stuff that we're going to do in the hypershade, okay? So this is where we're going to do it. This is the best place to do it, in my opinion. And it requires us to add a new node, a new input node into our system here, into our graph. We can find this node by cruising over into our Create browser. And specifically, we're going to go into the Utilities section. And we're going to scroll down here. I'm going to see if it allows me to do it. There it is. Projection, the projection node. This projection node will allow me to place a flat image on a 3D model, but change the rules ever so slightly to get the result that I'm after. Let's just go ahead and click on it. Bloop. And it always gets placed over here, way over here, which is silly, by the way. I really can't, it drives me crazy that Maya does that, right? You're zoomed into a node, you add a node, and it puts it way off screen, okay? So there it is. All right, so there it is. There's our projection node, okay? And if you look very closely at the inputs and the outputs of this node, you can start to deduct where this is going to go inside of our graph. What's the input? What's the input node for this node? You have a 50-50 shot. It's either image or out color. Image, right? Remember, all the nodes on the left are inputs. All the nodes on the right are outputs. So it's going to accept an image, and then it's going to send that image information through the out color channel. Okay? So it's going to receive a picture and then send color information from the node itself. If we compare the rest of the nodes inside of our network here, there it is. Where we're going to insert this is right here. Okay? This node's responsible for bringing the texture in, but check it out. It also has an out color. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take my noodle, and yes, that's officially what it's called, a noodle. Okay? And we're going to remap it. The out color of our image is going to go there. Bloop, and I'm just left clicking and dragging, by the way. And then the out color of the projection 1 node is going to get fed into the color node of my material. I've kind of inserted a new node into that graph. Let me do that one more time so everyone's caught up and with me, okay? And we do all of this just with the left mouse button and drag. I'm left clicking and dragging on the node to get my little noodle. I'm going to send its information into the image node. The out color, once again, left click and drag. It's going to go right there. Bloop. Cool, huh? Okay. So what does this do for us? Let's zoom out and take a look-see at how all this is now changing. Now, on the actual model itself, not a whole lot has changed, but there has been some big problems that have been imposed on the mesh itself. We've seen some texture stretching in certain areas. However, if you look carefully, on certain angles of my model, the texture's looking awesome, right? And then on other parts of my model, not so hot. That's called texture stretching, where certain pixels of the image are getting pulled and stretched as it wraps itself around the model, okay? We want to try to avoid this and change the projection rules of that projection node to get the correct result, or as close of a correct result as we can, okay? And I want you to keep that in mind. You're getting close, okay? These projections are not the silver bullet. They're not going to make it perfect, but they're a fast, quick way of getting textures onto models. You don't have to create a UV map for everything. Sometimes projections will work just fine, because UV maps take a lot of energy. A lot of energy. You will spend more time making UV maps than you will modeling, let's put it that way, okay? And once we get to that module in the distant future, you'll understand why. Okay. Okay, so we've added this projection node into the system here. Let's see what it's going to do, and I'm going to cheat just a little bit. And it's not a cheat, but I'm going to click on my projection node here. If you have your attribute editor open, all of its attributes are going to show up over here. And we're just going to hang out in the attribute editor for the remainder, because save us from having to go back and forth between the hypershade and in our environment. Okay? So let's check it out. The projection node has some attributes that we really need to zero in on, and there's some good stuff in here. Okay? Notice that the image one is already populated by its own input node, so we can't mess with it yet, okay? Most importantly, so there's a whole bunch of stuff in here, most of the stuff that you don't even need to deal with, but the one that we need to focus on is this projection type. This is a rule. This determines how this picture is wrapped around the model, okay? imagine you're sitting in the back of a cinema, okay? You've gone to the movies, you've gone to go see Rogue One again because it's awesome and it's Star Wars, right? You're sitting in the very, very back of the cinema, right? If you think about it, the screen in a cinema is very similar to a polygon, right? It's just a big flat wall, right? And an image is being projected onto that wall, right? That's how a cinema screen works, or a projector works, right? You know, a transparent, well, it used to be a piece of transparent celluloid was placed in front of a lens. They'd shine a light through that celluloid and lens, and then boom, that image would be projected on a very large screen, right? We're doing something very similar here in the computer, okay? We've created a fictitious camera. An image is being projected from that camera onto a very specific group of polygons. In our case, it's the polygons that are associated with the Lambert 1 material, right? Or the Lighthouse material, excuse me, that I created a minute ago. We get to change the rules of how that image is projected onto the screen. Now, if it's a flat screen, the planar projection type works just well. But in our case, is our screen flat? No, our screen is a cylinder. Our lighthouse is more cylindrical in nature. So changing the rule to cylindrical makes a little bit of sense, okay? Now, like I said, this isn't going to be perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. You can see instantly that the entire thing changes, okay? Now, you're probably saying to yourself right now, what? Because this doesn't look perfect at all, right? As some would say, we've taken a massive step back, because at least in the previous example, we had something that looked like bricks. Now we just have these colored bands. Well, without all things in 3D, we have to make some edits to the projection types in order to get it to work correctly, okay? And that's where the rest of these attributes really come into play, okay? However, you know, what's really kind of cool about this is we have this interactive placement option. If we click on it, you're going to get a little pop-over that says, Projection 1 must be connected to a placement node for interactive manipulation. Create placement node. Yes. Okay? Because check this out. Once we have a 3D placement node inside of our system, and FYI, it shows up as an object inside of our scene. We can grab it. Okay. Let's see. Move it around. Oh, it's at the origin, which isn't what I want. But actually, it will still work. Let's see. I'm going to go back. Let's see if I can get it to snap to that object here. Go back into my hypershade real fast. I want to grab my projection. Yep. And let's do fit to bounding box. There it is. If you do fit to bounding box, your placement node is going to be placed on the geometry or very close to it. Now, what this placement node is, and look at it very carefully, okay? It's a 3D representation of our texture, okay? When I changed my projection type to cylinder, it created a cylindrical shape. I'll move it out of the way. Oops, I accidentally selected off of it. If you move it out of the way, you can see that the texture is linked to the current location of that object. So we want to try to get that object as close as we can to the center of our model to get the correct wrapping of our texture onto the mesh. And check it out. You can actually see that now we're getting a pretty nice reproduction of that texture on the cylinder. Okay? These 3D placement nodes allow us to interact with these textures using our move, rotate, and scale tools. So for example, I could rotate this 90 degrees. You can see the effect that we're getting there. I can rotate it this way and change where the texture's showing up. Okay? Which is pretty neat. So you're going to need to do some basic editing to your 3D placement node to get it generally in the area that we want it to be. Okay? Now, you don't necessarily need a 3D placement node for everything, but on certain items, you're going to need it. Okay? And by selecting it either in the outliner or in the OpenGL viewport, you can really quickly get your texture to where it needs to go. Now, there's some other options in here that are pretty neat. Let's go back to textures.com for a second, and let's look at some environmental stuff, okay? Let's look at, like, grass. Because I want my, let's see. I'm going to go back to the root so I can get my pictures here. Landscapes, and oh, this is not it. Let's see, they used to have a section, oh, right in front of me called ground. And let's do this. Let's do, oh no, they used to have like grass and stuff. Let's see if we can find it. Rock. Here, we'll do it with rocks instead. Here we go. Because part of my island are rocks, right? It's not all grass. Let's find some good tiling textures. What do I want my rocks to look like? I want my rocks to look like that. Nope, I changed my mind. I want it to look like that. That's kind of fun. That's a neat pattern. So they have a tiling version and a non-tiling version of it. Let me just download the tiling version of it real fast. And I want to put it in my textures folder just so it makes it a little bit easier to navigate to over in Maya. Okay, let's go back over to Maya real fast and continue making some additional connections here with some polygons. Now, this is where the fun begins. There's the rocks. If you look carefully at the way this scene has been constructed, you're welcome. It's not all on one mesh item. I've begun to separate it out for you. Okay, makes it a little bit easier. Let's make a new material for these rocks. Assign a new material. Rocks, are rocks shiny? Not really, so maybe a Lambert shader would work. Yep. We'll call these rocks. And let's start getting to work here. Of course, we're going to load in a texture just like we did. Let's go find that texture. There it is. Open it up. Aha. Oops, that's my fault. Excuse me. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Right? It's a great example of how the computer's like, I don't know how to put this texture on this geometry. I don't know. These are shapes that my computer just doesn't understand. So let's go in and continue to add some details in here. Okay, the place 2D texture node, it's not really gonna, I could do interactive placement, but it's not gonna get what I'm after. Because what do we need? That projection type. Okay, return to our hypershade and start adding that projection in one more time. I'm gonna clear my graph here, or clear my work area, and then middle mouse button my rocks material down in, and then like we did before, I'll expose all the inputs and outputs so I can get to work here. Okay. So where inside of this system do I need to go to include that projection utility into my graph? I've given you a big hint. Utilities, yeah, the utilities category of nodes, okay? So utilities right there. And then we'll find it from the list. They're listed alphabetically, by the way. There it is, projection. Add it. Just single left clicking on it once will add it into our work area. And as I mentioned before, it's in there. They just are kind of silly, and they've placed it off screen, okay? Yeah, I know. It's just the silliest thing ever. So it is in there. You'll have to find it. Let's drag it over here and place it into our system, okay? So where is this going to go inside of our network? Look at its inputs and outputs. That's the biggest clue here. If you look at the input and the output, we can start to deduct the role or the application of this node into our graph. Okay? The input is an image. Okay, so it wants some texture information from a photograph. Well, what node inside of our network has all that texture information? This one right here, right? The texture node. So if I take the output of that and plug it into the input of my projection, I'm giving it the information that it wants. Get rid of that node. Boop. Put it right in there. Okay. Now I need to continue to feed this color information into my material, so I'll make the connection there. All right. I'm going to select my projection node so I can continue to work with it. Aha! Look at it now. Come on, fingers. My mouse is deciding to work oddly now. Now that we've added that projection node into the mix here, a texture is showing up on my polygons, right? It wasn't before with the default 2D placement, right? With this additional projection utility, the computer now has a new set of rules that's allowing it to place this stuff on top of my polygons, okay? So we have an interesting challenge here because we need to do some investigation. What general shape are my rocks? They're rock shaped. Are they a plane? Not really, right? Are they a sphere? Nope. Are they a cylinder? No, not really either, right? So these projection types here, the first little group, it's not a plane, sphere, cylinder. Is it a ball? And FYI, I'm not entirely sure what the difference between a ball and a sphere is. If anyone can discover that, I'd be fascinated to hear that, right? However, once we get past ball, we have some interesting ones. We have cubic and triplanar, okay? Cubic and triplanar are fantastic projection types because they look at our polygons from a number of different perspectives. And the computer is going to try to match and map our texture to those polygons based off of a lot of information. It's not a general rule like this is a ball, map it around a ball. This is a plane. It's going to take a whole bunch of shape information, do some analysis, and place our texture on it like that. Okay? So let's do, I like triplanar. Triplanar is pretty neat. And that looks pretty good, right? Now, I think our problem here isn't so much the triplanar mapping. I think it's the texture itself. We've chosen a tiling texture that has very noticeable repeating pattern in it, right? You can, just from a distance here, we can see the main highlight, this little rock structure here. We can see that highlighted, feature and every time it stamps down. So, well, we could do a couple things here. If we do, let's do this. Yeah, let's do interactive placement so we get our 3D placement node. We'll do fit to bounding box. It's way, way, way too big now because the bounding box is a kind of general representation that the volume that this model kind of populates. Well, I'm trying to place these objects on these textures on a lot of small objects around the entire island. So that's a good starting point. However, we need to do some editing. Just like our lighthouse, we can go in and continue to effect this 3D placement node. Okay, our move, rotate, and scale tools will allow us to go in and oops, I didn't select it. There we go. Will allow us to very quickly go in and make some global changes to how that texture is showing up inside of our model. Now I'm going to do this proportionally. I'm just going to globally scale down the model, or this texture, excuse me. You can see that you get to a point where if it's too small, you absolutely see the texture. But if it's too big, the details of the texture don't necessarily map or match the object it's mapped to. So you have to look at it critically and make some considerations as to what this is going to look like and how it's going to work. At times, and I think I'm presented with this problem now, at times maybe the best result is to go look at a different texture, right? Put another one on there. Luckily, in our workflow, it's really, really easy, and this is one of the powerful things about working inside the Hypershade, is that we don't need to make a brand new material from scratch. We just need to go in and influence a specific node inside of our graph. Does anyone want to take a guess as to which one of those nodes for my rock material I'm going to need to influence and change to swap the texture? Yes, it's the file node, right? Because the purpose of that file node is just to load a texture into the scene. That's all it's doing, right? And that's this one. So I can go in and just put a different texture in here, and I'll let's put carpet. Why not? Because I have it in my folder, okay? And then now I have carpet all over my rocks, okay? We don't have to completely go back and rebuild the material. We just change the file that's being loaded at the file input node. Kind of cool, huh? Make sense? Did I explain it perfectly on the first try? Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want us to spend some time, and we're not done talking about everything that we need to talk about today yet, but I want to spend some time today just kind of working on this project together as a class, okay? So here's what we're going to do. If you haven't already downloaded the project file from Canvas, return to the week 3 modules inside of Canvas, and here we go. It's the Lighthouse Project. And our goal, and you probably can get this kind of wrapped up today if you're working hard and working fast. Our goal is to go in and produce materials and textures for everything. Now keep in mind, we're here to create a picture. So you're going to have to add a light, put some shadows on there, right? Maybe this now is a good time to increase the quality of our shadows to make something that's pretty high resolution. Also, how are you going to create the illusion of a sky? Interesting challenge, right? Interesting challenge. I'm going to leave you to figure that part out, but I know you guys have the tools at your disposal to make that happen, okay? So if you haven't downloaded the project file, many apologies, I forgot to mention this before. It's in the resources section of our assignment sheet. There it is, Lighthouse Scene Start. Download it. Let's get to work. And I'll walk around and help you guys out and help you smash any bugs that you run into.